In breaking news, the United States Supreme Court has struck down a federal gun ban for cannabis users. Now, we're going to take a look at two articles, one from NPR and the other from the Cato Institute, which is apparently an independent law firm that just publishes decisions. But let's take a look at it because in the past, we've had some videos about our timeline for this Supreme Court to be ruled on. And we said summer before the August recess. And that's right now. So let's take a look at it. While the government may regulate active impairment and immediate dangerousness, the justices determined that the government cannot use ambiguous status-based categories to disarm citizens in their own homes. Now, there's a lot to unpack in here, so let's go through it. Today, the United States Supreme Court unanimously held that the federal ban on firearm possession by, quote, unlawful drug users violates the Second Amendment. The court ruled the federal firearm ban unconstitutionally overbroad, vague, and ahistorical, affirming that the fundamental right to self-defense is not forfeited by the responsible use of cannabis. While the government may regulate active impairment and immediate dangerousness, the justices determined that the government cannot use ambiguous status-based categories to disarm citizens in their own homes. The court further noted that cannabis use lacks the historical disarmament precedent of habitual alcoholism, rejecting a sweeping interpretation that would strip Second Amendment rights from millions of Americans. Ultimately, this ruling carries immediate, profound implications for millions of Americans who use medical or recreational cannabis under state frameworks, removing the threat of federal criminal liability for peaceful gun ownership. So ultimately, what they are saying in the wording is interesting. When they say possession by unlawful drug users or in their own home, what about outside their own home, and or mental illness? So let's take a look at that was little summary from Cato Institute. Now let's take a look at the article from NPR. But the case was brought by a Texas resident who admitted to FBI agents that he used pot several times a week at the same time that he owned legally purchased gun. He was soon indicted under the Federal Gun Control Act, which makes it a crime punishable by up to 15 years in prison for an individual to use illegal drugs and to have even legally purchased a gun. While it's the same law used to prosecute Hunter Biden, the Supreme Court's decision was sufficiently narrow that it may not isolate the prosecution. Now, what's interesting, they forgot to leave out that this guy was also on cocaine and trafficking cocaine. But they have chose to highlight the cannabis part of this for whatever reason. Maybe it's for just to set precedent, which I think it is. In explaining the decision, Justice Neil Gorsuch stressed that the ruling was extremely limited, in part because cannabis use has become so ubiquitous while widely accepted and is now legal to one degree and another in 40 states. Indeed, as Gorsuch observed, the federal government itself has reclassified cannabis products from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Therefore, the only thing before the court is the government's ambitious theory that could, quote, automatically strip people of their Second Amendment right to own a gun because cannabis use a few times a week. The court's answer was basically, no, you can't do that. So like we said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this case, the NRA was teaming up with the ACL and the cannabis councils and all these people to say, hey, no, these are freedom rights. And everyone was like, yeah, they are, even though the gun people probably are not all on board for cannabis. They're on board for guns, so they joined forces on the back end there. The decision was unanimous, though several justices filed concurring opinions. So was this a big win for gun rights advocates and cannabis advocates? It's a good question. I think it's a pretty significant win when we have basically the entire court saying that a federal statute can't go as far as it tried to go. The outcome of this case was based on the view that most Americans may hold, which is that weed is the new booze. The narrowness of the ruling, plus the fact that a total of 5 justices filed concurring opinions that spelled out different approaches, is a reflection of the many divisions among the justices on the subject of guns and gun relations, or cannabis and guns. So there's a lot of things being left out. Anyway, this is how this political articles go. Anyway, in 2022, the court's conservative majority declared for the first time that in order for a gun law or gun regulation to be constitutional, it had to be analogous to laws at the nation's founding in the 17 and early 1800s. Since then, lower court judges and the Supreme Court itself have struggled with how to apply such a rigid rule. Naturally, because times evolve, things change, and things come up that didn't exist in the 17 or 1800s. So they can't say, well, what'd they do then? They didn't do anything. They didn't know that they'd have cars or cell phones or internet they knew they had cannabis because they grew hemp and did all that stuff, and they knew how important it was. Thomas Jefferson himself said, hemp is imperative to the success of a nation. So they know the importance of it, but what I think is happening is they are setting precedent for the discussion to create these laws. Like, okay, cannabis users, recreational and legal, can use guns and own guns. However, now we're going to also apply what applies to alcohol. Okay, if you're an alcoholic or you've been in and out of jail or you're a felon or insert criteria here, they're going to say, okay, now you can't, use cannabis. So you squeaky clean record, sure, but, anything goes wrong or you get it, somebody says you need to go see a psychologist. They'll say, oh, look, they go see a psychologist. They're crazy. You can't use a gun. That can be applied to anything, though. So breaking news, update. We predicted this a year or two ago when they first came out. You can check out the videos. We've posted multiple of them saying that before the August recess, they will rule. And if you noticed, I don't know if you even noticed this. I don't even know if you noticed this article because it was buried with all the international news and a lot of stuff going on. But this is a pretty important case, and it's breaking news. So good news, Supreme Court has sided with cannabis users and is not going to ban them from owning guns. So that's a win for cannabis. It's a win for gun freedom, if that's a thing, because guns aren't people, but people own guns to their right. And congratulations. That's a W. And until next time, stay blessed and don't forget to tip your bud tenders.